Good morning, everybody. We are just letting people stream in a minute and we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Good morning. Shine, it's wonderful to see you.
It's nice to see you too, Dr. Van Hoy.
Wow, how's Houston treating our girl, our student?
I actually love it a lot. The amount of food that I can DoorDash is insane.
All right, well, slide over. We're coming to visit. That's it. You're toast.
You're always welcome to come visit.
Thank you. Jill, hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Glory, it's dark over there already.
Yes, it is.
Dang, that stinks.
What time is it there?
It's 5 p.m.
Oh, that's not too bad.
It's okay.
Where are you?
I'm in London, England.
Okay, so I guess let's do this. I think we are live streaming to Facebook even now, so we're extra fancy. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. We're excited to celebrate the end phases of this project, Digitizing the Old Spanish Trail Archive, the production of the exhibit that Glory's been working on, and just excited to celebrate today on a day in November. So a couple of things about Zoom. There is a Q&A button down in the bottom bar. Feel free to ask questions to our panelists at any point today, or you can use the chat box. If you are a panelist and you want to make sure that you are sending a message to everybody, make sure that you change it to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it'll just send to the panelists. And so we are excited to share with you some of what we've been working on with this project, some of the directions that it is still going. I'm excited to introduce our people that are with us here today. So we have Shine Trabuco, who is one of our first graduates of our St. Mary's Public History Master's Program, and she has started her PhD at the University of Houston this fall. She was one of the people that helped kick off this project along with Jill Crane, one of our librarians who's with us today too. We also have Glory Turnbull and Christopher Holman, who are two students who are undergraduates at St. Mary's, who are also taking classes in our graduate program at the same time. So Glory will be graduating with a bachelor's degree this fall and with a master's degree in the spring. So they have made speedy progress through our program. We're also joined by Teresa Van Hoy and later by another student, Amber Anderson, who will be sharing a little bit about the next program that we'll be hosting on November 18th. We also have another one of our students who couldn't join us today, Danielle Slaughter, who shared a video with us that we'll be sharing with everybody too. And finally, I'm Lindsay Wick. I have been working with everybody on this project, and this project is close to my own heart. When I interviewed for this job, I did a teaching demonstration that used some of the resources from the Old Spanish Trail Archive. So it's a special moment to be able to see all of this go live online. And so with that, we'll share more about the archive later on. We'll give you a brief view of it. But first, Jill Crane is going to share with us a little bit about the collection itself so that we can learn how it came to be at St. Mary's.
Great. Thanks. In 1982, the Old Spanish Trail Association donated their records to St. Mary's University. The donated collection was kept by two leaders of the association, both of San Antonio, Mr. Harold Ayers and Mrs. Henry Drought. The archives of the association includes reports and memorabilia, membership books, minutes, correspondence, clippings, brochures, and books published by the association in pursuit of its objective to facilitate tourism in their locales. The records date from about 1915 to 1932 and consist of about 4 cubic feet of materials. And the original processing for the collection was accomplished by some undergraduate students under the supervision of a history department faculty member. And at a later date, staff added some extraneous materials to the original collection, which includes a poster by Brother Cletus and a magazine article in the Texas Monthly on the Old Spanish Trail. As far as condition, in many folders, there are some highly, as you'll probably see, highly darkened and acidified pages that need conversion, as well as many folded news clippings. They were interesting to deal with. There are some full-size newspaper pages that also need separation, along with many maps. Also, as far as the managing director's correspondence, has scattered throughout carbon copies on newsprint paper that are highly acidified and even flake at being touched. Digitizing these records not only will aid in creating access, but also contributing to the preservation of the records. So we're happy to have it done. All right, I think Shine is next.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Shine Trabuco. To kind of briefly start off, I did start originally at St. Mary's, like Dr. Wick said, and I am now living off of the OST road in Houston. It is about 2 blocks away from my house, which I find kind of ironic and whimsical in a way. So I helped prepare to digitize the archive and help prepare the layout that the students used to guide themselves. And it was really daunting at first for myself because I was still trying to learn and define what an archive even is at this point when I was working. I remember asking, or even being too afraid to ask, what is the OST and why does St. Mary's have it? What does St. Mary's have to do with it? I remember meeting Jill and Charlotte, who is the president of the OST organization that helps with preservation. And I had previously met Charlotte in class when we began talking about the project for the OST, but I was still incredibly nervous because I had no idea, how much it meant to someone. And of course, when someone has so much attachment to something, you don't want to mess around. And you, of course, want to be respectful of that person's history. So I was not even sure what to expect when we began delving into these archives. And I remember when we pulled some of the boxes with Jill there, and then seeing all the different maps. And for those who don't know me, I geek out on maps. And I realized that the OST was not the Old Spanish Trail from the Spaniards, but indeed was a highway. And that was for promoting tourism. And I understanding what was even within this archive and seeing these massive maps, I had to really think about, okay, what does it mean to digitize this? And how can I develop the best steps for all of the students and for us to even look at what is within this archive? So I began reading different books, and I had to really teach myself and conduct my own research on the process of digitization and also the OST archive. I would practice, I would practice digitizing once we got this machine scanner called Caesar, and he is very close and dear to my heart for the digitizing process. And I remember when it came in, I was very excited, and it was this massive box, and it came with a bunch of fun tools, and I began practicing how to digitize so that I could write the step-by-steps for the students with Dr. Wick's kids art. So once I began understanding and developing what this archive was, I needed to understand what was important and the key words and the key terms for this archive. But in order to do that, I needed to immerse myself into the OST auto highway culture. So I began my adventure in Houston about a year ago, last summer, summer of 2019, and I went and I attended my first OST conference. The conference was small, but the people there are very large and very passionate about the histories that they're trying to preserve. And I really began to have a better understanding of what the OST really is. And so I did the tours. I was very involved in the conference, and I even had our own booths so I could conduct oral histories and interviews with those who may have remembered the OST or have had interactions with the Old Spanish Trail auto highway. And so I also went to the one in the OST conference that was in San Antonio. That was last fall, or everything is seeming to run together now. And to kind of keep understanding and keep developing what this culture means. And so with this and with hearing everyone's stories and personally connecting with everyone, I was able to develop key terms and words that was related to the OST auto highway. And so I helped to develop this, and these key terms will help the digitization of the archive for those who are trying to search for specific events, categories, people, places, and I think that's about it that I have for that.
Thank you, Shine. Okay, give me just a second. I'm going to try to share a video.
My name is Danny Slaughter. I was one of the student research assistants for the Old Spanish Trail Historical Archiving Project at St. Mary's University. I worked with Chris and Glory and Dr. Wick on scanning different artifacts and letters and maps and pamphlets into a special software, and from there we would input metadata into a spreadsheet to help us create and curate this online exhibition on the Old Spanish Trail, which was a highway that ran all the way from St. Augustine, Florida, through San Antonio to San Diego, California. It passed through all the southeastern states, through Texas, and on into Arizona, New Mexico, and California. So it was just such an interesting experience to see, how these people lived and wrote and commuted and just went about their daily lives more than 100 years ago. That was probably the most mind-blowing thing, was getting to read letters from the 1910s, which was astounding. I think the earliest we read was probably from just a little after World War I had ended. So that in and of itself is incredible to hold in my fingertips. I was so scared of destroying something. I thought it was gonna blow something up or set something on fire or something. I'm thankful I didn't. And it was enlightening too, just to see how far we've come as a society. We still have so much to do, but reading these newspaper articles and these letters and advertisements from all those decades ago, it was a little disheartening to read how, you know, white Americans of the day spoke about and treated Black Americans and Indigenous Americans, especially in the context of the historical goings on along this old Spanish trail, you know, heralding the Europeans whilst downplaying the contributions of BIPOC. So that was definitely interesting, and I'm grateful for how far we've come as a society. And as a big linguistics and history nerd, it was also just so fascinating to read the vernacular of these people, how they spoke, how they communicated with each other. And it really wasn't all that different from how we speak to each other today, a little more formal perhaps, but otherwise, you know, language hasn't really changed all that much. So it was remarkably easy to understand, you know, what these historical figures were talking to each other about. And I mentioned, you know, being a history nerd, and growing up in San Antonio, I had honestly never really bothered to learn about the Old Spanish Trail. I don't think I had ever heard of it before participating in this project. And I had seen the historical marker. It's downtown. It's a big boulder with a plaque that delineates San Antonio as the halfway point between St. Augustine and San Diego. But I had never read into or researched the significance of that until we did this project, and I'm like, wow, this is what it was for. I had honestly thought it was the same as El Camino Real, which I know now it is not, two totally separate historical Spanish highways. But like I said, it was a very fun and enlightening experience. I'm so thankful to Dr. Wick for giving me this opportunity to both just have something to fill these lonely quarantine hours, and also something valuable to put on my resume and jumpstart my career in what I really want to do, which is work in the historical and museum curation field. So, you know, just to reiterate, I'm so thankful for the opportunity, and I had a lot of fun.
And we're disappointed and sad that Danny can't be with us today, but we're very glad that she was able to share a video to share some experiences with us. I know all of us were working on this project through the pandemic, but the last time we all saw each other face to face was before spring break, when we kind of parted ways thinking we'd be back after spring break, and we didn't come back in person. So it's really nice to have everybody here together today to celebrate after working so hard on this. Before Chris shares about his reflections on the project, I just also wanted to recognize some of the other people who were involved. We also had help from other graduate and undergraduate students, Antonio Coffey, Harold Johnson, Oscar Ortega, Gerardo Nino Pozos, Bianca Ray Yaquez, and Claudia Sanchez. So I wanted to thank all of them for their hard work on this project. They all helped contribute to the metadata in the archive. I also wanted to express my gratitude to the Council of Independent Colleges, who provided generous support that got us started, from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And we also received additional support from the St. Mary's University Public History Program, Humanities Texas, Promoting Post-Baccalaureate Opportunities for Hispanic Americans grant, the Bloom Library, and we also received support from St. Mary's Spark and Information Services offices. So I wanted to make sure that I thanked all of them today too for making this project happen. Now next up is Chris sharing a little bit about some of his research in this area.
Hello, everyone. So like Dr. Wick was saying, my name is Christopher Homan. I'm an undergrad student at St. Mary's, and I, like Danielle Slaughter, also was an undergraduate research assistant who helped to digitize and to do the metadata for the Old Spanish Trail collection. And through some of my courses this year, I've had the opportunity to delve into the archive in a little bit more in depth than I have in previous years or in previous semesters. And so I decided to focus my research on the year 1922 for the Old Spanish Trail. And the reason why I chose it was because there's kind of this duality to it. Because on the one hand, there is this tremendous achievement of the Washington declarations, which airs is in Washington, D.C. in June and July, and he's working to get the Old Spanish Trail the federal recognition and thus the federal funds that it needs to become a material reality to actually complete this massive public work project of a coast-to-coast highway. But at the same time, while Ayers is in Washington, D.C., and while he's also in some other OST Eastern states, back in San Antonio, there are a lot of things unfolding, a lot of things being done that undermine the confidence of the OST members of Texas and the West, and undermine their confidence in the association. So while he's gone, the association president, Dr. Fred B. Johnston, and the office manager, David E. Culp, they take control of Old Spanish Trail finances. And when they do that, it creates a lot of waste. So a lot of the money that is coming in through Old Spanish Trail memberships being paid by ordinary people along the highway is being wasted, and they're not seeing a return on their investment in the forms of things like quality maps, section maps, and so they're kind of starting to get very nervous about what's going on at headquarters because there's a lot of exploitation going on, and there's a lot of really questionable things going on at headquarters. Another example of this, I think, is both Johnston and Culp did things that went against the Old Spanish Trail Constitution and bylaws. They, for example, they promoted Alberta Huey, an office worker, to the title of Secretary to the President without consulting Ayers, and this upset Harold Ayers, who was, again, he was away, and these kind of actions that they did, it undermined the confidence that people had in the leadership in San Antonio. And so when Ayers returns back to San Antonio in August after concluding his work in Washington, D.C., he is now charged with having to work out, having to investigate, quite literally, what kind of things that they've been doing and how to best remedy what they've been doing and get the Old Spanish Trail back on track to continue the construction. So he begins his presentation, he begins his investigation on August 17th, and they collect the evidence about things like the kind of malpractice of Johnston and Culp. They uncover evidence of some really kind of terrible contracts that have been made with OST fieldmen. They investigate farther into a bad check artist that Fred Johnston had hired to basically try and get Old Spanish Trail members to help pay for an Old Spanish Trail magazine. And this bad check artist had been cashing checks in banks that he had no account in. He had been leaving accounts unpaid with hotels and garages, and he even stole some money from a few chambers of commerce. So when Ayers comes back to San Antonio, he's in charge of really working all this out, doing the investigations, and getting the Old Spanish Trail Association back on track so we can actually continue the construction process. and he's in charge of working out the remedies and also of kind of restoring the confidence of people in Texas, and especially in Texas and the West. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Glory will be presenting next.
I was muted. Whoops. Right. Hello, everyone. So you already know me. My name is Glory. I've been with the Public History program since fall of 2018, and I've been working on the Old Spanish Trail digitization and exhibit project since we kicked it off during the fall of 2019. And initially, I was just tasked with scanning the documents and doing metadata, just like the other students who have presented. But during the spring, I was asked to take up the task of developing an exhibit that would sort of encapsulate the Old Spanish Trail and put it into a format that people would be able to easily digest. So make it as accessible as possible for as many people as possible. And this was somewhat daunting for me, although I do study public history, which you would think is, the development of exhibits. It wasn't really something that I had experienced or done before. So this learning process was both me doing research and learning about the Old Spanish Trail and me learning how to make an exhibit, make it accessible, and I'm not exactly a graphic designer either. So more recently, I've been learning how to put together a visually appealing and compelling exhibit. So first I'll take you through the process, and then I'll share a couple of the panels. I won't be able to read out all of the information to you from the panels, but I am currently working on a digital version. So even if you aren't able to physically visit the exhibit, you should be able to visit it on the St. Mary's Omeka with all the OST documents pretty soon. So the first step in my process was mostly reading. So after handling all of the OST documents, I had a pretty good idea about most of the biographical information about the Old Spanish Trail. But there's a lot of contextual things that you don't really get from primary documents. So my reading list was mostly focusing on heritage tourism as an industry, Southwest history, and specifically how throughout the past 100 years or so, and even a bit before that, we've utilized Spanish colonization and that sort of colonial history for tourism to, draw both tourists and permanent sort of settlers into the Southwest of the United States. Because, I wanted to get into some topics that maybe haven't been explored that much about the Old Spanish Trail, talk about race on the Old Spanish Trail, talk about women's contributions. And I met with Charlotte Call of the OST 100 to ask her what sort of topics she was most interested in seeing us, cover in the exhibit, because she has such a wealth of knowledge. I thought, who better to ask than someone who intimately knows the trail for, direction. Because the Old Spanish Trail is really broad, you want to capture all of the wonderful details, but you also want to capture that sort of wider context. And so it was really about finding a balancing act. And that's what my preliminary readings did and meeting with Charlotte. And once I began actually, formulating an outline for the panels, we decided on an 8-panel exhibit. And, it was mostly writing, and the entire process was also editing. So it feels like I spent more time editing everything than actually writing out the panels. And Dr. Witt can attest to that. It was a lot of back and forth, because I think what really makes exhibits work and what really makes them dynamic is having a really large variety of perspectives, so that, I just come to the table with my own sort of experiences and perspective. And, that's very limited because I'm a young person. I only have limited experiences. So, I need someone like Dr. Wick to come in with a more experienced public history perspective and say, okay, you need to make it more accessible here, or this doesn't work, or change your word choice, and also ask other people in the field for their input. Yeah, and I've really appreciated receiving feedback on my work. I think that's, really important in developing exhibits. And to be honest, there was a pretty big intermission when it comes to designing the exhibit, because during the summer I did take up another internship. And so, you know, it's pandemic, everything's a little bit crazy. I find myself in a new place, and there was a period of time where I got to just kind of dwell on the exhibit and, you know, focus on editing. It's been a really long process, to be honest. Within the past couple of months, I got into the design phase of the exhibit. After we finalized the text, I started designing what it would physically look like and what images we would use to demonstrate the points highlighted in the text. And I would say that it's been really fun trying to find all the like cool images from our archive and outside the archive. But I was working in Microsoft Publisher, and so it was a little bit tricky sometimes getting all of the different layers and text to agree with each other. So I think in the future, I would probably use a different software in order to design an exhibit. But yeah, as for the product itself, I definitely wanted to cover, you know, who, what, when, where, why, and how, but also kind of, like I said before, get into that context. You know, it's good to touch on like the Good Roads movement as a whole, you know, the 20s, and Dr. Van Hoy actually was covering it just this week in our Texas history class. Some of the values from the 20s do really shape American values today and throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. And so I'll just go ahead and share my screen with you and show you a little bit of the exhibit. Yeah, so here it is in PDF format. It might take a little bit to load in, but this is kind of our title slide here, Visions of a Transcontinental Southern Highway, the Old Spanish Trail. And this is just the overview. And in further panels, we get into, you know, the purpose of the Old Spanish Trail. It's not just for tourism, even though that is a major pull and a major pull for funding. The Old Spanish Trail was built to benefit small communities that didn't necessarily have good access to larger cities or into their small towns. And maybe they didn't have very good access to markets if they were a farmer. You know, this auto boom has a huge impact on, you know, the lives of Americans. I also wanted to get into the naming of the trail, you know, why the Old Spanish Trail? And yes, it's about the Spanish history, but it's also kind of reflective of these progressive era values of repaving, if you will, the American history that we know, moving on from painful sort of pasts and making something more attractive, something more palatable. We don't necessarily want to talk about colonization being, you know, violent as it tends to be. Instead, we want to talk about how romantic it is, how amazing it must have been to, you know, discover a new land, even though indigenous people had been living there for centuries. Also, the culture of the trail, automobiles, tourist camps, scenic routes. This panel, I think, was really fun because, you know, roaring 20s. I didn't really get into bootlegging very much, but, you know, auto highways and tourist camps, you know, the love of the open road, that's really born in this decade, I think. And that's when the OST is primarily constructed. And getting into heritage tourism. And it doesn't necessarily reiterate points of why the Old Spanish Trail is named the Old Spanish Trail, but it kind of gets into the nitty-gritty of why is this a trend throughout the Southwest? How is this profitable to, you know, use history in a way that's appealing and enticing? It's not necessarily a subject you always think is like super appealing, that's gonna draw tons of, you know, people from all around. I also wanted to get into who built the Old Spanish Trail, both in a sort of conceptual sense and a physical sense. You know, you've got the old OST board of directors, and you've got all of the boosters and the fundraisers and the planners, but you also have people who are physically building the trail, you know, mostly migrant labor who do like railroad and highway construction during this period. and kind of acknowledging, in some cases, it's like Mexican workers building a trail to honor the Spanish who had oppressed them for centuries. It's kind of an irony. And, you know, I was afraid in some cases of getting too deep or like too heavy when talking about the trail, and like trying not to lambast it too much and like criticize it. But I think it's necessary to criticize in some sense, because we can celebrate all of the achievements, and there are very many for the trail. But until we get more perspectives in there, it's not really a complete picture. We don't really get to, you know, take it all in unless we acknowledge that, yes, there are some shortcomings. Also, the role of women in the making of the OST. Now, there weren't any women necessarily on the board of directors. I believe there were some section secretaries, but women still had a very instrumental role in creating the Old Spanish Trail, you know, putting together the signage, standardizing even things like road width, passing laws in their area that would benefit drivers. And so they really did make very large contributions. And what became of the trail? Now, it's been subsumed by many larger standardized highways, but, you know, the memory is still alive. And, you know, decades people were fighting to keep the Old Spanish Trail alive, and we still are, because it's such a significant part of US history and, you know, Southern history. It was the first, you know, Southern transcontinental highway. And it did serve so many people. So it's important that we keep it alive. And it's such a collaborative effort trying to put this exhibit together, not just, you know, people coming in and editing, but also I couldn't have done it without having all of the, you know, documents digitized. I couldn't have done it without, you know, funding from the Council of Independent Colleges and, you know, everyone that Dr. Wick ran through at the beginning of this presentation. So yeah, that's it for me. And let me know if you have any questions. It's been quite a ride. And even though I've enjoyed every step of it, all good things must come to an end. And yeah, I'm really glad to kind of close this chapter and put my first real exhibit out there. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Gloria, and congratulations. I know this has been a massive undertaking to do this research and find the images and edit this text. And we've had many wonderful people help us along the way, including Charlotte, who many of you have mentioned. I know Shannon Murray jumped in and edited some text recently, and we've had lots of fantastic input from many people. So congratulations, Glory. We just got the messages yesterday that the exhibit is printed and shipped. Our plan was to put it up in the Bloom Library, hopefully for a little bit pre-pandemic. So we'll see where its first stop is, but most likely we'll set it up in my living room next week and do some kind of a video tour of it for everybody. We're really excited by it. We're hoping that it'll be able to travel around with the OST conventions or potentially to different sites along the OST. So if anybody is interested potentially in hosting this exhibit in the future, that's something we can talk about, or we'd also be happy probably to share the PDF version if somebody wanted to print a copy locally. So I'll share my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to me about that if you'd be interested in hosting it at some point in the future. We're hoping that this is something that will travel around and have a long life. Glory will also be adding this to our website as a digital exhibit and is something that people will be able to access as well. So I am excited to unveil our archive to you all. We have added, I think, over 1,800 items to it now. And there are about 50 more items that are waiting to be added as I'm finishing the final touches on them. Our students have handled them from beginning to end, assessing what's there, scanning the items, keeping a list of every item, producing metadata for every item and descriptions of every item so that they're searchable. We've added these to the website in hopes of making them both accessible, all of these documents accessible to people, and also preserved so that they'll be backed up in multiple spaces. Because like Jill noted earlier, some of them are in poor condition, I think, as they've aged. And so we're especially excited to have preserved those items. So I'll share this link in the chat box. Please feel free to open it and use it however much you would like. I'll just give you a brief overview of it. So the homepage tells you a little bit about the collection. It gives you a link to the inventory and finding aid. If you'd like to browse the collection, you can sort it by the title of the item. You can do different searches on the items. So for example, if we wanted to search for Lafayette, we can search that. And I guess I picked, or I'm spelling it wrong. We'll try San Antonio. So now we can see all of the items that talk about San Antonio. 971 items. And when you click on an item, it shows you the different image views of what we scanned and a lot of different of the search terms. So if we want to go see everything that mentions Harold Ayers, all we have to do is click on his name and it'll show us all of the items where students have flagged him as being mentioned. So there's many ways to search and explore the items that we've added. The final batch to be added includes some maps and other oversized items that we weren't able to fit on the scanner. So they've taken a little bit of extra processing to get them there, though they should be up in the next week or two. We also have an About the Collection page that tells you a little bit more about the collection. And finally, the area where we'll be expanding out more is the Learn More About the Old Spanish Trail. I've added a couple of projects here. We have student writing and student projects that we'll add more of as they are finished. And we'll also add an exhibit button up here where you'll be able to view Glory's exhibit once it's complete in the digital version. If you go in here too, you can also see I recently was working to map a 1929 travel log. So you can go in and see that map here. And I've also had somebody share with me some map data that we might be able to add to this map of where the trail ran. So we are very excited to share this with you all. We will continue to add student research products to it as they're being produced, and are very happy for any feedback or anything else you have for us. And so I will stop sharing my screen. And I'm excited to introduce Dr. Teresa Van Hoy, one of our professors here at St. Mary's, and Amber Anderson, one of our students in a graduate class this semester. And they're going to tell you a little bit more about some research that their classes have been doing. We're really excited that Dr. Van Hoy shared this with her students and that they're doing research on the Old Spanish Trail this semester. They'll be hosting an event on November 18th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. They'll share a little bit more about that with you today.
Thank you, Lindsay, and all the students. In fact, nothing of what my students have been able to do would, of course, have been possible without your work. And you work 2 or 3 times longer and way harder, but we also are excited about what our students have found. Dr. Wick's students took this robust collection, digitized it painstakingly and professionally, as good as any collection I've ever consulted, whether it's Harvard or UCLA. The metadata, the image quality, this is really a tour de force on the part of all the students. And to think that they were new to it it boggles my mind, and I'm just really grateful for that. Basically, they transformed, and also with a lot of support from our wonderful colleagues in the Bloom Library. Basically, this group just took a treasure trove of miscellany that was almost unusable, even for somebody who's on site. Of course, not at all possible for people who are located remotely, which we all are now. And they preserved it, and they made it instantly available all over the world as wonderful images, documents, and detailed metadata. So this is a really great gift. So now what? Now what do we do? Well, Glory put together an amazing exhibit, and that is a great project and really big. And I hope it will be touring the United States when Charlotte Call, bless her heart, who has committed to going to every single town through which the Old Spanish Trail passes. I hope she can take it with her. I hope she can get people excited about what happened in this big public works project, and what is that world 100 years ago. But also, I want Charlotte to take some more stuff. So I have 75 undergraduates who produced posters about each has produced a poster. These are digitized posters, Charlotte, so you don't have to imagine setting up, in addition to Gloria's exhibit, all these posters. So you can just have them scrolling on the wall at your commemorative ceremonies in chambers of commerce or city halls all the way across the nation. Some people are publishing stories in the official Texas State History Museum, the Bullock Texas State History Museum. That includes Chris. Chris's story will probably be published by next week. We will be including those posters and the publications as links in Dr. Wick's beautiful website beautiful site for this exhibit. But we also have 10 graduate students who kind of took things to the next level. And what they've produced is beautiful, especially because I called it a speed research project. I said, you've got 7 days, because we got a lot more to do this semester, and you got 7 days on the OST. Surprise me. And I have been blown away. Let me just mention one that has a very local focus on today. So Nicole Johnson took the Old Spanish Trail archive, and she started looking at New Braunfels. She just Googled New Braunfels because that's where she lives. And she couldn't believe, to her big surprise, these folks 100 years ago who were given $10 in support of the Old Spanish Trail are her neighbors today. She just, it was like a who's who of the folks she went to school with. So they're descendants. So she made a very local project about those folks today. But let me turn it over to one of the coolest projects, which is done by Amber Anderson, a graduate student who went bold. And I think she worked a lot harder than I had asked them to do. She decided, well, who is Mrs. Clarence something or other? Who are these women whose identities are masked behind their husbands' names? So Amber, can you tell us a little bit about your project, but don't reveal it all, because I want people to come to your showcase. Okay.
No, absolutely. So it really started, I found a list of the officers for the beautification department, and you have a few that are listed by their full name, but most of them are just Mrs. Like Ben Hoy said, Mrs. whoever. And I really wanted to find out who these women were. So I went to work trying to find out what their real names were, and trying to figure out what they'd done in their communities. And especially for the women who are from San Antonio, you have people who are on the founding board of the Whitty Museum, the founding board of the San Antonio Art League, the McNay. You have only the women who did all of these amazing things, but they weren't really mentioned in some of the OST. So for my project, I want to highlight their work in the beautification department, and then also highlight some of their independent accomplishments.
So stay tuned. Stay tuned, everybody, and please come November 18th. We're going to lead off. We have an hour-and-a-half showcase. We're going to lead off with the Old Spanish Trail. So from 6:30 to 7, we will be presenting in speed format these students' projects, about 4 to 5 minutes each. So, you know, don't be late. They're gonna start right at 6:30, and it's going to show you what can be done once a treasure trove is digitized. So please join us. Now, let me just throw in real quick a hook for you to stick around. Starting at 7 during this showcase, we will be presenting, the students will be presenting their work in Texas, their research in Texas history from 7 to 7:30, and then their work on California from 7:30 to 8. So it's a whole hour and a half of intense, quick, wild adventures in history. OST first, and then Texas, and then California. And I want to just kind of quickly tell you whose work is being featured. Some folks are here now. Thank you very much, Edgar, and other folks who came out today to support your colleagues. So Antonio is doing a podcast on the ballot. He's doing called Filmcasters. He's looking at how history gets told in film, and he's piloting it with a podcast on the ballot of Gregorio Cortez, who was a victim of Ranger abuse and atrocity at the turn of the 20th century. Michael, she is doing a map. She's mapping Confederate tributes in Texas, from counties to schools to monuments, and it's a kind of stunning map. I'm eager for you to learn it and use it in your own teaching and thinking about Texas history. Harold is premiering his Black in the Barrio project, funded by Dr. Pollo, which looks at African American history of the West Side, which is almost forgotten and ignored. So thanks to Dr. Boyle, we have been able to find, Harold has been able to do oral history interviews, identify images, find magazines produced by African American elite in San Antonio, and the Keyhole Club that not only was on what was called the Chitlin Circuit, but it was a haven for women's clubs, Black African American women on the West Side. So big story, breaking news, and I hope everybody will turn out. Edgar is looking at the 60th anniversary of the premiere of the Alamo at Woodlawn Theater. He is looking at including a Julian Trevino, a student at St. Mary's, who was one of the few Mexican Americans who even agreed to participate in that film. And so that's a cool contribution. Art looked at the Negro League. We got the centennial of the Negro League and victory in San Antonio, and the founding of the National Negro League. And Art has done a newsletter, which is professionally done and beautiful. Josh is working on curriculum for his community college course, which he's willing to share with folks who are going into education. So we're keen to invite educators as well. For California, we got a wild lineup also. Michael is looking at Jose Ramon Pico, who was a Union leader of the last Lancer Corps for the Union Army in California, and led his men across Death Valley in the summer to try and make sure the Confederates couldn't take Arizona. So intense story. She's partnering with the California Military Museum and suggesting that his rousing speech have a reenactment every March 3rd in downtown San Diego, San Jose. So that's exciting. Josh is looking at the remnants of World War II batteries constructed along the coast in California. Edgar is looking at Ramona, which was required reading in California, a film also produced by D.W. Griffith. Everybody's heard of, hold it now, I'm blanking. Edgar, what's the famous one? The Apology for KKK? Oh, dang it. D.W. Griffith, oh, Birth of a Nation. Everybody's heard of that one. Ramona is pretty intense also, and Edgar will be presenting that. Gwen is looking at prostitutes in the Old West. She found already some wild stuff they were called frail sisters or nymphs of the prairie. And her analysis is pretty cool. Amber is, Amber, you didn't talk about yours. Okay, I'm gonna save you and I want you to finish by telling about your Texas project and your California project. And Harold's looking at pro-slavery sentiment in the 1860s and 50s in California. Art is mapping earthquakes, and Crystal is looking at party girl culture in the 90s, which spontaneously emerged as an alternative to failed schools and street gang culture. So I'm really excited about these students, and I'll end with a student voice. Amber, hit it with your Texas and California projects. If you're still there. Okay.
No, I'm still here. So for my Texas project, I partnered with a local African-American history museum and operated a cemetery tour last week. So I'll be presenting the map and the corresponding virtual exhibit for that. And for my California project, decided to look at some of the recent wildfires and map some of the historic sites that have been disturbed or destroyed, and plan to donate that to one of the California historical societies.
Excellent. Well, I'll just conclude by saying thank you very much, Dr. Wick, for putting your students on this, and to the students for a fantastic job.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Van Hoy and Amber, for sharing with us today. All you need to get to their presentations on November 18th is the link you used to get here today. So it'll be broadcasting at the same place. So thank you so much. We're so excited to see what all of the graduate students have done. They sound like really excellent projects. Well, fabulous. Thank you to everybody who presented and shared with us today. We have a little bit of time left, so if people have questions, we would be happy to try to field them. Feel free to type anything into the chat box and we will answer, hopefully. I know there have been a couple of questions about if there are any errors in misspellings in the archive. You can email me. My email is in the chat box. And we're happy to fix those. Some of the writing was really difficult to read or on aged documents. So we can definitely get those corrections made if you have them. Yes, this is recorded. So if you go onto the St. Mary's Public History Facebook page, there is a recording that is going there right now. And we can also add a link to it onto the archive later, I think. Thank you to everybody for your kind comments in the chat. We'll wait 1 or 2 more minutes and see if anybody has any questions. And if not, we will wrap things up. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today for taking a little part out of your day, especially on a kind of historic hour in the US. So we are so happy that you came to share and celebrate with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, for supporting our students, for coming and listening about their work. And again, feel free to reach out with any questions or anything else that you would like to share later on. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday.